Hello, my name is Professor Matthew Rotella, and today I am going to go over modeling from reference. So I'm going to go over getting your reference images into Maya, what can make a good reference image, and I'm going to make part of a model from my reference. I plan on continuing the model in future videos, but for now I'm going to stick to just part of it. Now, the thing that I would like to model is a acoustic guitar. Today I had planned on just modeling the body, and what makes a good reference image is you want some nice orthographs. So you want some photos that are fairly high resolution. You're going to want them to be at least 1,000 pixels in a dimension, generally. And I'll point out why. And you're going to want them to be nice and straight on from, basically think of if you were getting a camera and putting them on like the 6 sides of a die. I only have 3 views, in my case here, where I have the top, the side, and the bottom. But ideally you would also have one looking at like the bottom straight on over here, and the top straight on from the right. But these are good enough for me to get like a crosshair going, so to speak, which you'll see what I mean in just a second. And I think these are exactly 1,000 pixels wide, but basically the reason why you'd want them to be more is when you go to start modeling the finer details, you're going to have a hard time really seeing what's going on. So for example, up here at the head, if I go to zoom in, I can't quite make out exactly how these pieces are inserting into each other, and I also can't quite make out how some of the forms down here where the strings attach are working. But anyway, the reason why I ended up picking these was just because they had like good straight on images, and also on the website that I found these images, they have the dimensions, so I can model this to scale. They have the dimensions of the guitar in individual pieces and the overall length, which will help me with my modeling as well. So basically, yeah, so let's get started. Let's get my reference images into here, into Maya. So what you're going to want to do is, which I have these images stored in my source images folder in my Maya project folder, which in this case is just the default one that Maya generates by default. But generally, you're probably going to want to create a project for each new thing that you're working with. But your source images is just a convenient place to keep them. Anyway, you're going to be wanting to look under View, right here above your viewport, and then Image Plane, and you're going to import image. Now, when you're just in your perspective camera and you go to import image, which switch back to my default project, source images, and then it's going to just attach it to the camera, which when you're doing camera matching, this can be a really useful tool. But in this case, that's not what I want. I want it to be at the view that I'm going to be looking at it from. So, what I want to do is I want to go into my orthographic views in Maya, which the most convenient way to do that is you just hover in your viewport and you press the spacebar, and that'll bring up your top, front, and side. You can also get to it by going to your panels and then orthographic, and then there's also these little guys right over here on the side. But anyway, I got a top view of my object, so I'm going to hover over top, press spacebar, and that's going to bring me into my top orthograph. And now I'm going to go into View, image plane, import image. I'm going to select the image that I would like to import, and now I'm going to my source images and acoustic guitar top. I have it named, and now when I go back into my perspective view, you can see I have the top view in Maya. So next I'm just gonna get the side view in there and work from there. So look at the side here, view, image plane, import image, and then go my side view, open, and now, which I suppose, I want to have this running along the x-axis, so I'm going to import this into my front orthograph. I can also just rotate the image plane, but just for the sake of having it be zeroed out at but just for the sake of having it being zeroed out facing the right way, I'm going to import it there. And next up, what I'm going to want to do is make sure that my two images line up. And you can see that although it matches up pretty well at the base, down here, my top view is coming out longer than my side view. So I want to do a little bit of resizing, and since they match up pretty well at the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this guy over on the side. I'm going to hold down D to move my pivot. I have some snapping turned on. I'm just going to turn that off. And I'm going to move my pivot down here where it matches up reasonably well. And I'm going to move it over to match that up. And now I'm going to scale it. And just going to scale it in all directions until the two parts of the body match up on the top there. And I went a little too far, I think. Scale it back to about there. And I can also raise this up, make sure, see, we're still coming up, I'll scale it back a little bit more and have my two tips match up. Should be about there. Well, you know what, which this is always going to be the thing where even reference imagery that matches up really well, sometimes you can still have a little bit of discrepancy between the two. The key is that when you're doing your alignment of your various parts of the object, that you just want to make sure that you're being more consistent to one. Otherwise, some things are going to be off. So, like, if I want to do most of my alignment unit using the top of the guitar, like when I'm placing the frets, for example, if they're not matching up between my two orthographs perfectly, then I'll just, like, commit to lining them up using the top-down view. And, alright. So now, I want my body of my guitar to be the correct scale. So here online I can see that the body has a length of what, judging by these marks, I'm going to assume it is 19 7/8 inches. I'm not going to get it down perfectly to the eighth. I mean, I can, but like whatever, so I'll just say, so I'm just going to say 20 inches is my body length. Now by default, Maya is going to be working in centimeters, so what I'll do is I'll just go up to Windows, in my settings and preferences, and in my settings I can change my working units to inches. Alright, now I can get my grid to be exactly 20 inches. I can go up to Display, click on the little option box here, and I'm going to make the length and width 10 units because it'll make it 10 units in positive and 10 units in negative, so 20, and redline every 1 unit, so every inch, and subdivisions I'll have as 1 so I don't have a whole bunch of other stuff. And now yeah, I'll just close that out. Now select my two reference images right here, and I'll group them since they're aligned and I want them to scale at the same time. And I'm going to scale them using the group and just scale them up. I'll try not to be too finicky about this. Turn off my snapping, still had that on from something else. And just line it up with my grid, and that should be maybe a touch more, and then just move her up, and that should be just about perfect. But if I really want to make sure, doubly, triple sure that my length of my guitar body is 20 inches long, I can also just do this. I can make a cube, and I'll just make it. A cube is what you're going to be wanting to use for as your starting primitive for most models, but I'll go to my polycube here, and I want to build it out in X, so I'll go into my width, and I'll hit 20, and that'll give it a length of 20. And see, you know, it's kind of fitting that it is coming up just a little short because it is in fact 19 7/8. So what I can end up doing, and let me see, does it have the width of the body? Probably does. Whatever. I don't really know enough about guitars. I don't play guitar, but anyway. And let's see, and I can start scaling it and whatnot. But anyway, now what I really want to do is take a good look at how I want to start tackling building this. So for one, I'm going to want to try and line certain things up so that I have my corners in places where they will be useful to me, because the corners can end up giving you a little bit of funkiness. So I might want to try and keep them where the guitar is more flat. And to help me line everything up, what I can do is I can go into my top-down view here, and I can press 4 to go into wireframe view. You can also just, there's a little symbol for it up here. And I want to go into, I'll go into vertex selection mode, and let's use my marquee to select some vertices. And I'm going to start matching up my edges with my model. Now also what you want to do is you want to try and maintain a center line, which I can do by just adding a subdivision in depth, or you can insert it using your insert edge loop, or you can just make sure it has a subdivision from the start when you are in your little option menu here. But while it's still just basically a primitive, I can just drop it in there, no harm, no foul. Anywho, and now what you want to do is you want to rough in the entire shape and then start to refine from there. So basically, and I'm going to start by moving the corners to places that behoove me, so that I can start building out these curves in ways that I want to. So basically it so I'm gonna start moving these out to where it just starts to curve. That way when I start working with these curves, this doesn't give me too much trouble, because the corners can give you some amount of funkiness when you're trying to shape using the corners. Now, if you're working with an object that has corners, that certainly simplifies things a bit, where that certainly simplifies things a bit. You just put the corners where you have corners. I'm just going to realign those vertices. I don't know how they got out of whack. Probably selected them without my marquee, so I'm just going to place these here. And now what I'm going to start doing is adding edges where I have the apexes of curves happening. So I'm going to use my insert edge loop tool, and let me see, I'm going to take a step back here, and I want to try and look for, right in here, and I can start scaling and working with this, and Q vertex, I'll just move this like that, and then, like I said, you want to try and rough in the whole shape, and like so, and before I get too far, I want you to keep in mind that you want to rough in the whole shape. So you might get carried away as you essentially just start tracing the shape of the guitar, and then not quite realize that you're not paying enough attention to the other dimensions of what you're working with here. Where I certainly want to go through and make sure that this is the right thickness. So I'm going to bring this up, bring this down, and you'll notice that it has this little taper to it. And I'm just going to do it how I would do any other part of the model, and essentially just trace it. And yeah, the back has that taper and shape to it, so that it curves to your body, where the top is pretty much perfectly flat. And you just want to keep that in mind as you're modeling and working, that you're going to want to be switching through to different individual views as you're working. And basically once you have the apexes of curves in, then you can just go ahead and how did my, is this my center line that got out of whack somehow? I'm just gonna straighten that out, and I'm gonna realign that on the origin. And because I want to maintain this as like the apex of everything. And alright. Yeah, and we're looking good. And I can even do some work from here in my perspective view when it comes down to it, which is kind of the purpose of how we set up that crosshair in the beginning, and you can really see how it can take shape relatively easily. And I'm just gonna go ahead and get working. And if I want to keep these straight, I can just use my scale tool and scale them inwards like that, and I can maintain more of like a straight grid as I'm working. But so yeah, you're probably going to want to be doing a lot of this work from your orthograph, and the way that you build out curves is you just keep tracing. You just keep lining things up as you go until you feel that you have curved it as much as you need to curve it. And just using my hotkeys to switch between my basic manipulators, Q for selection, and then W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale, just in case anybody was confused. Just gonna keep on trucking. Just adding them one at a time. And now let's see. And about now, I will have lost sight, so to speak, of my taper. Although, since I took the time to make sure it was tapered right before, and it's a pretty smooth curve, most of these are pretty much aligned for me already. I'll just line some of these up. Here. We want to move just the bottom here. And you can see we basically have the entire shape of the acoustic guitar down. I might want to just go through and add a few more edges, and I might have wanted to give myself a little more space. To add some vertical edge loops, like perhaps I more so want this corner to be over here. That way, when I add a vertical edge loop in here, which if I want to straighten out, I can, just using my scale tool. I can scale it inwards and straighten it out, and then I can go ahead, move this vertex to match this curve, and so forth, and but basically, modeling from reference, which is how you should model pretty much everything, just comes down to some form of tracing when it comes down to it. You just line up your reference images, you make sure that everything is measured properly so that you end up modeling to scale, and then from there you can pretty much just trace it out a little bit at a time, making it as high fidelity as you want to, or as high poly rather as you want to. Polys do not necessarily equal fidelity, as it's as someone could easily put way too many polygons in an object. But just trying to get a couple of these curves smoothed out. But anyway, I'm going to stop myself here as far as making this any more smooth and matching perfectly. Although actually I'll insert one more right along here, I think. Actually, I need one more in here to sort of tame this curve a bit. And maybe I even need looks like I need two more, as a matter of fact, just to capture that curve a little bit better. And one more up here, but yeah, and that's pretty dang good. Maybe here, and just scale that out a little bit, and then I'll double check to just make sure that this taper from back to front hasn't quite gotten, or from base to neck hasn't quite gotten away from me, and it looks pretty good. So now I think it's time to tackle a question that I'm sure a lot of you have maybe been asking yourself this whole time, and that's the hole in the guitar. Now, Basically, the trick to doing this was in a rigid body like this, you have a little bit of leeway with how you can end up pulling your polygons, and I basically just need any amount of polygons to come together and form the circle in the middle. Now, as far as forming these into a circle, I can in fact just once again do the good old trace it method and bring it in to some extent. And you're going to want anywhere from 6 to 8 vertices forming your circle. But basically I'm going to form it out of these two edge loops that I have coming right down the middle, and that'll form a circle of sorts. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to select all of these, and to make sure that they are aligned in a perfect circle, I'll just use this here circularize tool, which missed one, which will pull them into as perfect of a circle as I'm going to get with the number of polygons I have. Then I'll just get these faces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and delete them. And now, basically there's two ways that I can go about forming the inner, because you never want to have just a single shell of exposed polygons. Like, you never want to be seeing into, like literally into, a polygon object like this. Like, you never want to be seeing these black polygons, because your normals are facing outwards, the direction of the gray area. So that means that these polygons aren't facing the correct way, so to speak. And there's two ways that we can go about having this form a complete shell. One way is pretty straightforward, but doesn't necessarily give us a ton of control. I can select all of these polygons, like the entire thing, which I just double-clicked on it to select every polygon, and hit extrude, and then and then I can bring that extrusion, I just pulled it inwards, and everything will come in. But now you can see all of my polygons are facing the wrong way. I've turned it inside out in a way. But to make the face the right way, you can just double click the whole thing and go to mesh display and reverse. And now all my polygons are facing the correct way, and I have a shell. So that's one way you can do it. Or what you can do instead is I can select the object, hit Control D to duplicate it, and you know what, I'll just hide the original so that I have a backup of my model in case anything goes wrong. Now I'll hit Control D again, so this is now my second duplicate, but and what I can essentially do is just scale it inwards, and now I have my two shells, which which perhaps what I want to do, instead of scaling the whole thing inwards, is I can scale it vertically first so that all of these polygons hit straight, so that all of these polygons, when I go to bridge between them, are straight perfectly one above the other. And then what I can do is get my duplicate here and get this whole band of polygons and scale those inwards separately, just a touch. So now I got a little bit of clipping up yonder. I can always go back and fix this after the fact. Not that the clipping would be a huge deal, considering this will be within my other one. But yeah, so now I have a shell, and I'm going to want to reverse the normals on my inner shell here. So let's display reverse. And the reason I want to do that is so that it will bridge properly. And now I'm going to go up to edit mesh, combine, to combine them into the same polygon mesh. And now I'm going to want to bridge from one to the other, edit mesh, bridge. I want no subdivisions, and I'll hit bridge. And now I have my acoustic guitar body with complete with hull, and it has a proper shell. Now you might say, why would I do the second method when the extrusion method basically was more of a one-step process? And basically the answer is you just get a little more control over how your inner polygons are placed when you do a like duplicated shell that you manipulate, but it's up to you. Neither way is really right or wrong, it's just different. But although it is also true that when you combine the mesh, it will give you these transforms, but those can always go away whenever you're finally finished modifying. You don't want to delete your history until you're completely finished modeling an object, but that can always go delete by type history, and those transforms just get cleared right up. Anyway, that about sums it up for modeling an acoustic guitar body. I haven't quite gotten to the finishing step of adding some smoothing information, but yeah, looking good. And we will continue this in the next tutorial, where I'll do the neck, and then I'll do fine details in a third segment is the plan, but we'll see. Alright, thank you very much, and hope you learned.